The Echoes Within, a multi-dimensional examination of domestic intrusion and its human tapestry. First introduction, unveiling the layers of a profound event. Imagine a home, a sanctuary, where laughter echoes and safety is presumed. Now picture that sanctuary irrevocably transformed, its very essence shattered by an event that defies easy explanation. This is the story that began on the morning of December 26, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado, when the Ramsey family home became the epicenter of a mystery that would captivate and confound the world. The discovery of a chilling ransom note and the subsequent tragic events did more than just shatter the Ramseys' foundation of security. They cast a long, perplexing shadow over their lives and the entire community. This was not merely a crime against property, it was a profound violation of a domestic space, an incident whose ripples extended far beyond its immediate confines, touching upon the deepest human experiences of loss, memory, and public perception. This narrative delves into the intricate tapestry of human experience woven around this specific incident of domestic intrusion. We will journey through insights from forensic science, psychology, physiology, sociology, cultural studies, and anthropology, all directly applied to the JonBenet Ramsey case. Our exploration seeks to provide a comprehensive understanding of the multifaceted consequences of such an event, particularly focusing on the behaviors of the individuals involved and the striking contradictions that emerged from their accounts. This is not a piece of apologetics, rather, it is an unflinching look at the dark side of deception, examining why these inconsistencies appeared and why they continue to surface, especially if the narrative of an external intruder is to be believed. A central tenet of this exploration is the meticulous and sensitive handling of potentially distressing themes, where discussions touch upon the most delicate aspects of human vulnerability, such as the profound suffering that can follow a violation or the quiet despair that can settle upon a spirit. Allegorical and indirect language will be employed. This approach honors the human dimension of these experiences without explicit detail, ensuring the narrative remains respectful and empathetic while maintaining its factual rigor. Second,
before we get started, I want to send a special shout out to I Can Only Imagine 57 for the support of the channel, support of the work. I appreciate you so much. Got to give you a hug. Boom. Thank you so much for your support. Much love to you, and I hope you enjoy the next video.
The threshold of violation, forensic insights into entry and evidence. The initial moments following the discovery of a domestic intrusion are often fraught with confusion and disbelief. Yet, it is within these critical hours that the silent narrative of the event begins to unfold through forensic evidence. Understanding how an intruder might have gained access and what traces they may have left behind becomes paramount to reconstructing the sequence of events and comprehending the full scope of the violation. A. Pathways of access, deconstructing entry and exit procedures and behavioral contradictions. Every household has its routines, its rhythms of entry and exit, which can inadvertently create vulnerabilities. For the Ramsey family, their daily comings and goings largely revolved around the garage. John Ramsey often explained that the internal door connecting the house to the garage was typically left unlocked by design, a conscious choice to rely instead on the security of the main garage doors. He frequently used a garage door opener from his car, rarely needing a physical key for the house door, a pattern that underscored convenience over stringent, multi-layered security protocols for internal access. There were multiple garage door openers, including one tucked away as a backup under the barbecue grill cover, further illustrating this reliance on automated, seemingly effortless access. Patsy Ramsey echoed this, confirming that the interior garage door was indeed the only one they would typically leave unlocked at night, trusting that the main garage door, once lowered, would be locked. This established pattern, deeply ingrained in their daily lives, inadvertently created a potential point of ingress that might otherwise have been secured. From an anthropological perspective, the home is a place of relaxation and trust, often leading to a lowering of one's guard, where established routines, even seemingly innocuous ones, can become points of vulnerability in the face of unforeseen threats. This also highlights the psychological comfort derived from routine, which can sometimes diminish an individual's awareness of inherent risks. On the night of December 25, 1996, after returning from a Christmas party, John Ramsey recalled pulling their Grand Cherokee into the garage using the opener. His routine involved carrying a sound asleep JonBenet from the car and upstairs via the back spiral staircase to her bed, removing her shoes or coat before Patsy took over. A significant detail emerged in his recollection. He did not remember closing the garage door himself, stating he only remembered carrying JonBenet. He speculated that Patsy most likely closed it, as they had forgotten on other occasions, but admitted they did not discuss it afterwards, so he did not actually know. He also stated he did not remember if he ever looked in the garage the next morning, the 26th, despite believing he would have noticed if it was opened and that it looks like it was closed. John confirmed he could hear the garage door going up and down from his bedroom, but he did not hear it operate that night. Patsy Ramsey, in her interviews, consistently stated she did not remember the specific lockup or security procedure for the house on the night of the 25th, nor did she remember specifically if she or John closed the main garage door when they arrived home. She noted that their routine was to come in, close the door, and hit the button. These initial uncertainties about a basic security measure, the closing of a large garage door, immediately raised questions about the family's attentiveness to the home's perimeter on that critical night. The morning of December 26, 1996, after the discovery of a ransom note, brought further inconsistencies regarding the house's condition and John Ramsey's actions. John initially stated he believed he checked all first-floor doors and that they appeared locked, an action he claimed took less than 30 seconds. He clarified this quick check involved going around to the back of the garage to see if that garage door into the garage was locked, an excursion that took less than 30 seconds. He reiterated this quick check in a later interview, confirming it would have taken 20 seconds. Not very long, 30 seconds if that. Patsy Ramsey recalled John running around checking various doors, prompted by her repeated question, "How did they get in?" though he did not explicitly inform her if he found any unlocked doors. However, in a later interview, when asked if he had done a walkthrough to ensure doors were locked, John contradicted his initial claim, stating, "I didn't that night. No." Despite this later statement, police reports and Linda Arndt's report cited John Ramsey, stating that all doors and windows were locked when the family went to bed on December 25, 1996, and remained locked the next morning when JonBenet was discovered missing. Further complicating the narrative, a friend of the Ramseys reported finding the butler kitchen door, which led to the outside, opened shortly after 6 a.m. on December 26, a detail John Ramsey denied. This presents a clear contradiction in high-stakes, traumatic circumstances. The discrepancy could stem from the immense stress of the event, which is known to influence memory recall. The police corroboration might have been based on initial statements made under acute stress or a general assumption. The later "I didn't that night" might be a more accurate recollection, made when the immediate emotional intensity had somewhat subsided, or it could represent a defensive shift in his account. This vividly illustrates the challenges of obtaining reliable witness testimony in high-stakes situations, where memory distortion, external factors, and pressure can compromise accuracy. The shifting accounts from John Ramsey regarding his checks of the house's security on the morning of the discovery, particularly the garage door, immediately invite scrutiny. If an intruder was truly to blame, why the uncertainty and contradictions about the very points of entry and exit? John Ramsey also confirmed a history of having to gain entry to his own home when locked out, stating he had done so maybe twice, maybe 3 times during their ownership of the house. His preferred method was through a specific basement window, chosen because it had a single pane of non-insulated glass, making it the least expensive to repair. To access it, he would lift and remove the grate covering the window well, lay it on the ground, and then jump down into the well. From there, he would reach in to unlatch the window or pop it open if it was stuck. He recalled breaking the window once before, suggesting it might have been my foot, and would typically remove his suit coat and pants, possibly his shirt, to avoid damaging them during entry. He described turning around backwards, placing his knees on the ledge, letting his feet in, and then dropping into the basement. The basement room was described as pitch black without lights and difficult to navigate due to junk piled in there. He did not recall turning on the lights, but probably would have in a dark room, and did not replace the grate after entry. Patsy later cleaned up the glass from this broken window upon her return in the fall. On the morning of JonBenet's disappearance, John observed this specific basement window to be cracked open about 1/8 of an inch, a condition he stated wasn't terribly unusual, as it was sometimes open to let cool air into the basement. He initially closed and latched it when he first checked the basement alone that morning. He also noted a large suitcase under the window that he believed was used to climb out and did not belong there. However, a significant contradiction emerged from Burke Ramsey's interview with Commander Eller in 1998. Burke stated that he was in fact with his father, John Ramsey. When John broke the basement window to gain entry to the house, Burke explicitly confirmed that his father went through the basement window, while he himself did not, but rather waited for his father to unlock the door from the inside to let him in. This account directly challenges John Ramsey's consistent assertion that he was alone during any such instances of breaking into the house, including the specific occasion in the summer approximately 6 months prior to JonBenet's passing, which he described as occurring late at night, around 11:30 p.m. Patsy Ramsey's interviews also corroborated John's account of being alone during this particular event. The stark divergence between Burke's recollection and the accounts provided by both his parents introduces a profound layer of complexity to the narrative of the home's vulnerabilities and the reliability of memory under extraordinary circumstances. This discrepancy highlights the intricate and often elusive nature of truth when filtered through individual perspectives, particularly when those perspectives are shaped by the passage of time and the profound emotional weight of a family's shared ordeal. It underscores the challenges inherent in piecing together a coherent timeline of events, where even seemingly minor details can become points of significant contention, inviting deeper scrutiny into the very fabric of recollection and its susceptibility to the subtle currents of individual experience and the collective unconscious. If an intruder was the culprit, why would the family's accounts of past entries into their own home be so inconsistent, particularly regarding who was present? Furthermore, a critical piece of objective evidence emerged from police testing of this basement window. An investigator from the Boulder District Attorney's Office performed a test entry through that window, which revealed that such an entry would inevitably bring in a lot of debris. This debris, however, was not found on the ledge on the morning of December 26, strongly suggesting that no one entered the house through that specific window that night. John Ramsey found this information interesting. This stark contrast between a detailed personal account and objective forensic findings highlights a fundamental tension in criminal investigations. While subjective human testimony is prone to the reconstructive nature of memory, stress-induced distortion, and potential bias, objective physical evidence, adhering to principles such as Locard's exchange principle, provides a silent witness. The absence of expected trace evidence, such as debris from a forced entry, can be as significant as its presence. This underscores the critical role of forensic analysis in validating or challenging human accounts, especially in high-stakes situations, where memory may be compromised by trauma or other factors. The lack of debris from a supposed intruder's entry through the basement window, despite John's detailed description of how he himself would enter, stands as a significant challenge to the intruder theory. B. Principles of forensic science. The silent witnesses in the Ramsey case. Forensic science operates on fundamental principles that guide the meticulous collection and analysis of evidence, allowing for the silent reconstruction of events. A cornerstone of this discipline is Locard's exchange principle, which asserts that every contact leaves a trace. In the context of the Ramsey case, applying Locard's exchange principle means that any intruder would have left traces of themselves, for example, fibers, DNA, footprints, and taken traces from the home, for example, carpet fibers on their clothing. Conversely, if a family member was involved, their presence would be expected, but the absence of foreign traces or the presence of unexpected family-related traces in unusual locations would be highly significant. For example, if an unknown intruder had been in the basement, their DNA or fingerprints should have been found, or fibers from their clothing. If, however, only family DNA or fibers were found in unexpected places, it would challenge the intruder narrative. This principle dictates that every person who enters or exits a scene will inevitably add or subtract material, underscoring the critical need for rapid and thorough scene security. Crime scene processing begins with establishing the scene dimensions and identifying potential safety and health hazards. In the Ramsey investigation, this would have involved securing the entire house and surrounding property to prevent contamination, identifying potential entry and exit points, and ensuring the safety of responders. For instance, the police would have cordoned off the entire Ramsey home, including the yard and garage, to preserve any potential evidence related to an intruder's path. Investigators first locate the focal point, the main area of disturbance, and then expand the scene to encompass all potentially relevant physical evidence. The basement area where JonBenet was found would undoubtedly be a focal point, from which the scene would expand to include all rooms, staircases, and potential pathways an intruder might have used. Safety is paramount, with responders being vigilant for weapons, biohazards, or chemical hazards. Following this, security is established by cordoning off the area with tape or cones, and a common entryway is typically designated for all personnel, with everyone entering or leaving the scene documented. This rigorous documentation is crucial in a high-profile case like the Ramsey investigation, where every movement and potential contamination source must be accounted for, especially given the early presence of multiple individuals in the home. Before evidence collection, a primary survey or walkthrough is conducted. During this initial assessment, the lead investigator identifies valuable evidence, takes notes, and captures initial photographs to document conditions such as the position of lights, shades, doors, movable furniture, and even smells. In the Ramsey home, this would have included meticulously documenting the state of the basement window, the suitcase, the ransom note's location, and any other items that seemed out of place, all before any items were touched or moved. To facilitate a systematic search, various crime scene search patterns are employed, including the strip, wheel, spiral, zone, and grid methods, each designed to ensure comprehensive coverage of the area. C. Unraveling the narrative, forensic indicators of forced entry and trace evidence in the Ramsey case. The physical environment of a crime scene often bears subtle yet crucial indicators of a forced entry, acting as silent narrators of a violation. Tool marks where a door was pried or forced open can precisely indicate a point of entry. For instance, if an intruder had forced the basement window in the Ramsey home, investigators would meticulously search for specific tool marks on the window frame or latch that could indicate the type of tool used, providing a silent narrative of the forced entry. The absence of such clear tool marks, despite the suggestion of a forced entry, would be a significant point of inquiry. Similarly, shoe prints can reveal not only the presence of an intruder, but also their path of travel within and out of the premises. If an intruder had walked through the house, perhaps tracking snow or mud from outside, shoe prints might have been found, potentially revealing their size, type, and path of movement, which would be crucial for tracking their presence within the Ramsey residence. The presence of items that are clearly out of place or do not belong to the residence, as well as signs of ransacking, are also crucial indicators suggesting an unauthorized presence and the nature of the intrusion. In the Ramsey case, the large suitcase found under the basement window, which John Ramsey stated did not belong there, would be a key indicator of potential intruder activity, prompting questions about its origin and purpose. Beyond these macro indicators, forensic analysis delves into the microscopic world of trace evidence. This generic term encompasses small, often microscopic materials that can be transferred through contact, such as hair, fibers, glass, paint, and soil. Trace evidence provides pertinent information, helping to solve crimes, corroborate statements, and determine the sequence of events. Its value lies in its ability to establish connections between people, places, and objects, even if the primary actors are no longer present. The collection of trace evidence requires meticulous attention to detail to prevent contamination and loss. Common methods include handpicking. This involves visually examining an object for visible trace evidence, often aided by oblique lighting or a magnifying glass. In the Ramsey case, this would involve carefully examining JonBenet's clothing, the blanket she was found in, or the garrote for any foreign hairs or fibers. Once located, items are carefully collected by hand or with forceps and placed into appropriate packaging, with photographs taken if the location is significant. Tape lifts. Clear adhesive tape is pressed against a surface to lift microscopic materials. This method would be crucial for collecting fibers from carpets, furniture, or the surfaces of the basement room in the Ramsey home, especially in areas where an intruder might have moved or made contact. The tape is then carefully placed onto an acetate sheet or within a clear sheet protector for preservation. Combing for evidence on a person's body. A comb or brush can be used, with a piece of paper placed underneath to catch falling evidence. In the Ramsey investigation, this would involve combing JonBenet's hair or the clothing of family members to collect any transferred hairs or fibers. A new comb must be used for each distinct body area to prevent cross-contamination. Removal of an object. If trace evidence is securely attached to an object and cannot be easily removed, the entire object or the portion containing the evidence may be collected after photographic documentation. For example, if a piece of glass from the broken basement window was embedded in a suspect's shoe, the entire shoe would be collected. Packaging of trace evidence is critical for its integrity and subsequent analysis. Generally, evidence is placed in the smallest comfortable container, such as paper bindles, coin envelopes, or small boxes, with careful attention to preventing contamination and loss. Wet samples, if collected, require air drying in a clean, controlled environment before final packaging. Specific packaging protocols exist for different types of trace evidence. Fibers, collected with tweezers, tape lifts, or vacuuming, and packaged in paper folds, sticky notes, or envelopes. In the Ramsey case, clothing items from all family members and the victim would be placed in separate paper bags to prevent cross-transfer of fibers. The presence of unknown fibers, or the absence of expected fibers from an intruder, would be critical. Footwear and tire impressions. These are photographed at a 90-degree angle with a scale before any other recovery method. If an intruder left footprints in the snow or mud outside the Ramsey home, or inside on a dusty surface, These would be meticulously photographed and then cast or lifted. Three-dimensional impressions are typically cast with dental stone, while two-dimensional impressions are lifted using electrostatic or gelatin lifts. Casts are packaged in breathable bags, never plastic, and must not be cleaned for at least 48 hours. The absence of clear intruder footprints, despite the suggested entry points, would be a significant point of contention. Geological materials, soil, collected intact to preserve any layered structure and packaged in sealed, rigid plastic containers to prevent loss. If an intruder entered from outside, soil from their shoes could be transferred to the Ramsey home's floors or carpets, and this would be collected carefully. The police tested the basement window, which showed that entry would bring in a lot of debris not found on the ledge, directly relates to this type of evidence. Glass, fragments, often found on clothing, tools, or in hair, are packaged in puncture-resistant containers like boxes or rigid plastic containers, with all edges sealed. In the Ramsey case, any glass fragments from the broken basement window found on clothing or the suitcase would be collected and packaged to prevent further breakage or loss. Paper or glass containers are avoided due to the risk of loss or further breakage. The absence of glass fragments on the suitcase or around the window well, despite John's history of breaking that window, is a crucial detail. Paint, chips, or smears are carefully collected with forceps or a razor blade, ensuring all layers are obtained and packaged in small metal canisters or paper folds placed into coin envelopes with sealed corners. If a tool used for forced entry left paint transfers on the window frame, these would be collected. Tape is generally avoided for lifting paint. Biological evidence, DNA, and latent prints, while specific collection methods for these were not detailed in the provided materials, their critical importance is acknowledged, and precautions are emphasized to prevent their loss or contamination during the collection of other trace evidence. In the Ramsey case, DNA evidence found on JonBenét's body and clothing from an unidentified male and latent prints from various surfaces would be paramount to the investigation. The presence of unknown DNA, while seemingly supporting an intruder, must be weighed against the other inconsistencies in the family's accounts. The meticulous recovery and preservation of these silent witnesses are crucial for forensic investigation, allowing objective physical evidence to corroborate, contradict, or fill gaps in human narratives, especially when initial accounts may be influenced by the profound shock of an event. D. Understanding the unseen, interconnections, and broader implications in the Ramsey case. The detailed examination of entry procedures and forensic evidence reveals a complex interplay between human behavior, the environment, and the objective truth. One significant observation is the paradox of domestic security and human habit. The routine behaviors of the Ramsey family, such as leaving the interior garage door unlocked and relying on automated openers, highlight a common human tendency: the prioritization of convenience and comfort within the domestic sphere over the implementation of stringent security measures. More specifically, in the Ramsey case, John's habit of leaving the interior garage door unlocked, or his past practice of breaking into the basement window, illustrates how familiar routines can inadvertently create vulnerabilities that an intruder might exploit, or that could be used by someone within the household. This is not an isolated phenomenon, but reflects a broader anthropological understanding of the home as a sanctuary, a place where trust and relaxation prevail, often leading to a lowering of one's guard, as seen in the Ramseys' established patterns. This situation exemplifies how established routines, even seemingly innocuous ones, can become points of weakness when confronted by unforeseen external threats. The psychological comfort derived from these routines can, paradoxically, diminish an individual's awareness of inherent risks, creating a subtle yet significant opening for intrusion. If an intruder was truly the cause, why would the family's own security habits and past actions create such a convoluted picture of entry? Another critical understanding emerges from the elusive nature of truth in high-stress recollection and behavioral inconsistencies. The contradictory statements made by John Ramsey regarding his actions on the morning of December 26th, initially claiming to have checked all doors and found them locked, then later stating he didn't that night perform a walkthrough, underscore the profound impact of acute stress on memory. This discrepancy is not necessarily indicative of deception, but rather a testament to the brain's complex response to trauma. Research in psychology and neuroscience indicates that while stress around the time of an event can sometimes enhance memory formation, acute stress before memory retrieval markedly impairs the ability to recall previously learned information. This impairment can affect all stages of memory processing, encoding, consolidation, and retrieval. The human brain's physiological response to trauma, involving the release of hormones like cortisol and norepinephrine and Changes in brain regions such as the amygdala and hippocampus can fundamentally alter how events are encoded and retrieved. This presents a profound challenge for forensic investigations and legal proceedings, where initial statements, however contradictory, often carry significant weight. It highlights that eyewitness testimony, despite its compelling human element, is inherently unreliable in high-stakes situations due to memory distortion, external factors, and pressure can compromise accuracy. The most striking behavioral inconsistency lies in the accounts of John and Burke Ramsey regarding the basement window entry. John consistently stated he was alone during his previous break-ins, including the one in the summer when Patsy and the children were out of town. Patsy corroborated this account. However, Burke's statement that he was with his father during one of these entries, and that John went through the window while Burke waited to be let in, directly contradicts both parents' narratives. This raises significant questions about the reliability of individual recollections, particularly when they diverge on such a specific and unusual event. For example, if Burke's account is accurate, it would mean John's memory of being alone was either a lapse or a deliberate omission. Furthermore, John's uncertainty about whether he closed the garage door on the night of December 25th, despite his ability to hear its operation from his bedroom, and Patsy's complete lack of memory regarding the house's security that night, stand in contrast to John's initial assertion to police that all doors were locked. His quick 30-second check of the exterior garage door the next morning, where he didn't notice it was open, further adds to the inconsistencies, especially when juxtaposed with his earlier claim of a thorough check and his later admission of not having done a walkthrough. These behavioral discrepancies and memory lapses, particularly under the immense pressure of the circumstances, become central to understanding the human element of the investigation. The persistent nature of these contradictions, particularly from key individuals, casts a long shadow over the narrative of a simple external intrusion. Why do these inconsistencies keep showing up if an intruder is to blame for JonBenét's disappearance? Finally, the silent narrative of trace evidence versus human narrative provides a powerful counterpoint to subjective accounts. John Ramsey's detailed description of his method for breaking into his basement window, including the removal of the grate and the pitch-black conditions, stands in stark contrast to the police forensic test. The test indicated that such an entry would produce a lot of debris, which was conspicuously absent from the window ledge on the morning of the discovery. John Ramsey found this information interesting. This direct contradiction between a personal account, however detailed, and objective physical evidence is crucial. It demonstrates the fundamental tension in criminal investigations. While human testimony is susceptible to the reconstructive nature of memory, stress-induced distortion, and potential biases, forensic science offers a silent witness that adheres to immutable physical laws such as Locard's exchange principle. The absence of expected trace evidence, such as debris from a forced entry, can be as significant as its presence, providing a powerful means to corroborate, challenge, or fill gaps in human narratives. This underscores the critical role of forensic analysis in validating or questioning subjective accounts, particularly in cases where memory is compromised by trauma or other factors, thereby guiding the pursuit of truth beyond the shifting sands of human recollection. Key types of trace evidence and their significance in the Ramsey case. The meticulous analysis of trace evidence is a cornerstone of forensic investigation, providing objective data that can corroborate or challenge subjective accounts. Let's explore common types of trace evidence, their characteristics, typical locations, and the vital information they can provide in reconstructing events, with specific examples from the Ramsey case. Fibers are small, often microscopic threads from clothing, carpets, or upholstery. In the Ramsey case, investigators would meticulously search for foreign fibers on JonBenét's clothing, her bedding, or the blanket she was found wrapped in, as these could indicate contact with an unknown intruder. Conversely, the presence of fibers from the Ramsey home's carpets or furniture on items like the garrote or suitcase, if they were used by an intruder, would be highly significant. If a family member was involved, the transfer of their clothing fibers to JonBenet or the crime scene could also be a key piece of evidence, potentially linking them to specific actions or locations within the house. The absence of foreign fibers where an intruder should have left them, or the unexpected presence of family fibers, would raise questions. Glass fragments can originate from broken windows, bottles, or other glass objects. In the Ramsey investigation, the broken basement window was a critical point of interest. Investigators would look for glass fragments on the clothing or shoes of any potential intruder, or on tools that might have been used to break the window. The absence of expected debris from the broken window on the ledge, as revealed by police testing, was a significant finding that contradicted John Ramsey's account of a previous break-in through that window, suggesting no one entered that way on the night of the incident. This lack of expected glass debris challenges the narrative of an intruder using that specific entry point. Soil geological material includes dirt, sand, minerals, or other geological matter. If an intruder entered the Ramsey home from outside, particularly through a basement window or another ground-level entry point, soil from their footwear could have been transferred to the floors, carpets, or the suitcase found under the window. The collection and analysis of such soil could potentially link an unknown individual to the exterior of the property or to specific outdoor locations. The absence of such foreign soil, despite the suggested outdoor entry, would be a notable detail. Footwear and tire impressions are two-dimensional dust, residue, or three-dimensional mud, soil imprints. In the Ramsey case, if an intruder had walked through the house or driven a vehicle near the property, investigators would search for footwear impressions inside the home or tire impressions outside. These impressions could identify the type and size of shoe or tire, potentially linking them to a specific individual or vehicle and indicating their path of travel within or around the Ramsey residence. The lack of clear, identifiable intruder footprints within the house, despite the suggested movement, would be a point of concern for the intruder theory. Tool marks are impressions or striations left when a tool is used to force entry or manipulate an object. If the basement window or any other door in the Ramsey home was forced open by an intruder, forensic experts would examine the points of entry for specific tool marks. These marks could indicate the type of tool used, such as a pry bar or screwdriver, and potentially link a specific tool to the scene, providing concrete evidence of a forced entry. The absence of definitive tool marks consistent with a forced entry, despite the suggestion of one, would be a significant gap in the intruder narrative. Paint chips, flakes, or smears can come from painted surfaces like vehicles, walls, or tools. If an intruder used a tool to force entry into the Ramsey home, paint from that tool could have transferred to the window frame or door, or vice versa. Conversely, if a family member's actions involved contact with painted surfaces, paint transfers could also be found, providing additional forensic links. Hair, human or animal, can be transferred through contact. In the Ramsey case, investigators would meticulously search for foreign hairs on JonBenet's body, her clothing, the blanket, or the garrote, as these could belong to an unknown intruder. Similarly, hairs from family members found in unusual locations could also be significant. DNA analysis of any hair with a root sheath could provide crucial identification information. The presence of unknown DNA, while seemingly supporting an intruder, must be weighed against the other inconsistencies in the family's accounts and the lack of other corroborating intruder evidence. The meticulous recovery and preservation of these silent witnesses are crucial for forensic investigation, allowing objective physical evidence to corroborate, contradict, or fill gaps in human narratives, especially when initial accounts may be influenced by the profound shock of an event. When the physical evidence does not align with the spoken word, it forces us to ask, why the discrepancy? Third, the mind's unfolding scroll, psychological and physiological responses to disruption. Beyond the tangible evidence left at a scene, the profound impact of a domestic intrusion resonates deeply within the human mind and body. The experience of such a violation triggers a cascade of psychological and physiological responses, profoundly affecting memory, perception, and emotional well-being. A. The shifting sands of memory, recall under duress and its behavioral manifestations. Memory, far from being a static recording device, is a dynamic and reconstructive process, particularly susceptible to the profound influence of stress and trauma. Research over the past 2 decades has consistently identified stress, along with the hormones and neurotransmitters released during and after a stressful event, as major modulators of human learning and memory processes. While stress experienced around the time of learning is thought to enhance memory formation, potentially leading to robust and vivid memories, stress experienced before memory retrieval markedly impairs the ability to recall previously learned information. This impairment can affect all 3 stages of memory, encoding the initial acquisition of information, consolidation the process of stabilizing a memory trace, and retrieval accessing stored information. Cortisol, a steroid hormone produced in response to stress, plays a crucial role in these processes. Short-term memories, sometimes referred to as flashbulb memories, are believed to be created through the combined action of cortisol and adrenaline, which can also aid in future memorization. However, prolonged exposure to elevated cortisol levels can damage hippocampus cells, a brain region vital for memory formation. The concept of reconstructive memory theory posits that the act of remembering is not a literal recount of past experiences, but rather a reconstruction influenced by various other cognitive processes, including perception, imagination, motivation, semantic memory, and existing beliefs. Individuals tend to perceive their memories as coherent and truthful, often believing their perspective is free from error during recall. However, this reconstructive process is highly susceptible to distortion from individual perceptions, social influences, and world knowledge, which can lead to errors during reconstruction. Schemas, which are mental representations or information networks based on prior experiences, play a central role in this process. When there are gaps in episodic memory, individuals tend to supplement these blanks with other aspects of available personal knowledge and schemas, potentially leading to confabulation, the involuntary false remembering of events, or the making up of details to fill in missing information, often without conscious awareness of the fabrication. In the Ramsey case, the discrepancies in John's accounts regarding checking the house doors or the garage door on the morning of December 26th could be interpreted through the lens of reconstructive memory, where the immense stress of the situation might have led to an unconscious filling in of memory gaps or a blending of routine actions with the traumatic event. This could explain why his initial statements to police about all doors being locked later shifted to an admission of not having done a thorough walkthrough. A particular type of memory that often arises in the context of emotionally charged events is flashbulb memory. These are vivid, long-lasting memories of surprising or shocking events, often emotionally significant, which people frequently recall with photographic detail. Such memories are not just of the event itself, but include the circumstances surrounding it, where one was, what one was doing, who informed them, and their emotional reaction. The principal determinants of a flashbulb memory are a high level of surprise, significant consequentiality, and heightened emotional arousal. While individuals typically express high confidence in the accuracy of their flashbulb memories, and this confidence tends to remain stable over time, research has surprisingly found that their actual accuracy can decline, sometimes at a rate similar to more ordinary memories. It is important to distinguish flashbulb memories from flashbacks, which are common in post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD), and refer to intrusive, distressing traumatic memories that resurface without warning. For example, Patsy Ramsey's vivid recollection of finding the ransom note and calling 911 would likely be a flashbulb memory, intensely clear in her mind, yet even such vivid memories can contain inaccuracies over time, particularly in peripheral details. The reliability of witness accounts in high-stakes situations is a critical consideration within the legal and investigative spheres. Eyewitness testimony can be compelling and persuasive in a courtroom setting, as jurors often find first-hand accounts vivid and impactful, capable of conveying unique details not available through physical evidence, thereby bridging complex legal concepts with human understanding. However, despite this persuasive power, eyewitness testimony is inherently unreliable due to several factors. Memory distortion is a significant concern, as research reveals that memories can change over time, especially when individuals are under the influence of stress or fear. External factors such as suggestive questioning, leading statements, or the stress associated with a lineup can significantly cloud a witness's memory, altering what they believe they observed. The seminal work by Loftus and Palmer, 1974, vividly demonstrated this, showing how the wording of a leading question, for example using smashed versus hit to describe a car collision, could significantly alter participants' speed estimates and even create false memories, such as reporting seeing broken glass where none existed. Unintentional bias and the pressure to appear confident can further compromise the accuracy of testimony. Consequently, courts are increasingly cautious about relying solely on eyewitness testimony for conviction. In the Ramsey case, the multiple interviews with John and Patsy, and later Burke, over time, and the varying details provided, highlight the challenges of relying solely on witness accounts, especially given the high-stress environment and the potential for external factors to influence recall. The inconsistencies in their narratives, such as Burke's contradiction of his parents regarding his presence during a past break-in, become particularly significant when viewed through this lens of memory's fallibility under duress. The interplay between these aspects of memory under duress creates a profound paradox of memory, vividness versus veracity in trauma's wake. An individual experiencing a domestic intrusion, a deeply shocking and emotionally charged event, might form a flashbulb memory that feels intensely vivid and is recalled with absolute certainty. However, the very stress of the event, combined with the brain's reconstructive nature of memory, means these vivid recollections can be inaccurate or highly susceptible to external influence such as leading questions or post-event discussions. The physiological responses to trauma, including the release of cortisol and norepinephrine, further complicate this, fundamentally altering how memories are processed. This has profound implications for legal systems and societal understanding of trauma. Jurors, often swayed by a confident witness, may mistakenly equate confidence with accuracy 12, yet this confidence is not a reliable indicator of truth, especially in high-stress situations. This calls for a more nuanced approach to evaluating testimony, acknowledging the brain's complex and often fallible response to extreme events, and emphasizing the importance of corroborating evidence over sole reliance on subjective recall. In the context of the Ramsey case, as we've discussed, the shifting and contradictory accounts from John and Burke Ramsey regarding the basement window entry and the garage door status exemplify these psychological principles. John's initial certainty to police about all doors being locked contrasted with his later admission of not performing a thorough check and his inability to recall. Closing the garage door despite hearing its operation illustrate how stress and the passage of time can distort memory and lead to inconsistencies in a person's narrative. Burke's direct contradiction of his parents' accounts regarding his presence during a previous break further highlights the reconstructive nature of memory within a family unit under immense public scrutiny. These behavioral manifestations of memory under duress become central to understanding the complexities of the investigation and the challenges of discerning truth from the subjective experiences of trauma. If an intruder was truly responsible, why would the memories of the family, the very witnesses, be so inconsistent on key details of the home's security and past events? B. The body's silent symphony, physiological markers of trauma and their behavioral impact in the Ramsey case. The human body possesses an intricate system designed to respond to perceived threats, a system that, when overwhelmed by traumatic events, can undergo lasting alterations. The acute stress response is initiated within seconds of a stressful encounter, with the autonomic nervous system rapidly activating to release catecholamines like noradrenaline from the adrenal medulla and brainstem. These neurochemicals are central to the fight-or-flight response and significantly impact attention, working memory, and long-term memory. Somewhat slower, the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal HPA axis activates, leading to the secretion of corticotropin-releasing hormone CRH from the hypothalamus, which then stimulates the pituitary to release adrenocorticotropic hormone ACAH. ACH, in turn, prompts the adrenal cortex to produce and release cortisol into the bloodstream, reaching peak concentrations approximately 20 to 30 minutes after stress onset and readily entering the brain to affect cognition and behavior. For instance, upon Patsy Ramsey's discovery of the ransom note and JonBenet's disappearance, the immediate physiological shock would have triggered this acute stress response, potentially affecting her ability to recall precise details or perform actions with perfect clarity in the moments that followed, contributing to the initial chaos and potential for memory gaps. Traumatic stress, particularly chronic or prolonged exposure to threat, can lead to lasting structural and chemical changes in key brain areas, fundamentally altering an individual's neurobiology. The amygdala, the brain region responsible for processing fear and other emotions, shows increased function and activation in response to traumatic stress. In the Ramsey case, the prolonged stress and grief experienced by the family, compounded by intense public scrutiny, could lead to heightened amygdala activity, contributing to persistent anxiety or hypervigilance in their daily lives, potentially making them appear guarded or defensive. The hippocampus, a critical area for learning and memory, is highly sensitive to stress. Traumatic stress can lead to smaller hippocampal volumes and inhibit neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons, impacting memory formation and retrieval. This could contribute to the memory lapses or inconsistencies observed in the Ramsey's testimonies over time, as the brain's capacity for precise recall might be compromised by the enduring trauma. The prefrontal cortex, involved in executive functions such as planning, decision-making, and controlling social behavior, shows decreased function following traumatic stress. This could manifest in individuals like John or Patsy as difficulties in concentration, problem-solving, or emotional regulation during the intense period of the investigation and public scrutiny, potentially affecting their ability to articulate a consistent narrative. Beyond structural changes, traumatic stress leads to long-term neurochemical dysregulation, particularly of norepinephrine and cortisol systems, resulting in increased responses to subsequent stressors. This persistent dysregulation contributes to a state of chronic hyperarousal and vulnerability, which might explain prolonged states of anxiety or difficulty in coping with new stressors for those deeply affected by the tragedy, potentially influencing their demeanor during interviews. The influence of acute stress on cognitive functions is complex and can be paradoxical. Acute psychosocial stress, which elicits cortisol secretion, significantly impacts cognitive performance, with attention, working memory, spatial judgment, and cognitive processing efficiency being particularly susceptible. Interestingly, moderate amounts of stress can sometimes improve cognitive performance, following an inverted U-shaped curve, by reducing response latency and increasing throughput. However, acute stress can also shift decision-making patterns. For instance, it can make habit action more dominant, leading individuals to prefer or avoid risk without deliberate consideration of expected gains or losses. Conversely, it can also facilitate strategic deliberation in pursuing inner goals. Specifically, increased cortisol levels are linked to risk avoidance in decision-making, particularly in the gain domain, suggesting a cautious bias when choice conflict is maximal. In the Ramsey case, the acute stress experienced by John Ramsey when he discovered the ransom note, and later JonBenet's body, could have influenced his decision-making and memory recall in those critical moments, potentially leading to actions or statements that appeared inconsistent later. For example, his quick 30-second check of the garage door, despite the immense chaos, might be a manifestation of stress-induced habit action or a limited focus under duress rather than a deliberate attempt to mislead. These physiological alterations underscore a profound understanding, trauma's remodeling of the brain and self. The lasting changes in specific brain areas and the dysregulation of neurochemical systems are not merely transient responses to an overwhelming event, but represent an enduring remodeling of the brain's architecture. This physical transformation directly underlies the constellation of psychological symptoms observed in conditions like PTSD and complex PTSD, CPTSD, including intrusive thoughts, hyperarousal, emotional dysregulation, and profound difficulties in relationships and sense of self. The brain's desperate attempt to cope with overwhelming threat reshapes its very structure and function, leading to a persistent state of vigilance and altered emotional processing. This understanding shifts the perception of trauma responses from purely psychological coping mechanisms to a neurobiological reality. It highlights that an individual's suffering is not a weakness of character, but a direct consequence of physiological changes. Anthropologically, this implies that profound disruptions to an individual's sense of safety, such as a domestic intrusion, can literally alter their biological being, impacting their capacity for social interaction, trust, and even their core identity. This calls for trauma-informed approaches in all societal responses, from law enforcement to mental health services, recognizing the deep, often invisible wounds that reshape an individual's entire being. C. The soul's tremor, the enduring psychological landscape of violation in the Ramsey case. A domestic intrusion or break-in, even in the absence of direct confrontation or physical harm, can profoundly impact an individual's mental and emotional well-being. The home is deeply perceived as an extension of the self, a private and safe haven where one can truly be at ease. When this fundamental sense of safety is shattered, it leaves behind profound feelings of violation and vulnerability, initiating a complex and often enduring psychological tremor. For the Ramsey family, the violation of their home, compounded by the tragic loss, would have shattered their core sense of security, leading to a cascade of emotional and psychological responses that would manifest in their behaviors and statements. The spectrum of psychological distress following a home invasion is broad and deeply unsettling. Sleep disturbances, the traumatic event often triggers a persistent fight-or-flight response, leading to a chronic state of hyperarousal. This physiological state can manifest as difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or even severe insomnia, disrupting the restorative processes vital for mental and physical health. It is highly probable that John and Patsy Ramsey experienced severe sleep disturbances in the aftermath of discovering the crime, a common reaction to such profound trauma, which could further exacerbate memory issues and emotional regulation. Anxiety and fear, a break-in, can intensely disrupt one's sense of personal well-being, potentially triggering an anxiety disorder. This manifests as persistent and excessive worry or dread, even in everyday situations, and a pervasive fear of another intrusion. In extreme cases, this fear can interfere with daily functioning, leading to panic attacks and social phobias where individuals avoid social situations or public spaces. The Ramseys, having experienced such a profound violation and facing intense public scrutiny, would likely have grappled with intense anxiety and fear about their safety and the security of their remaining family, potentially influencing their guarded public demeanor. Anger is a natural and common response to a home invasion. This can range from a strong desire for retribution against the perpetrator to blaming family members or feeling anger towards law enforcement if the situation is perceived as inadequately resolved. In the Ramsey case, public reports indicate that John and Patsy expressed anger towards the media and even law enforcement at various points, reflecting this common psychological response to perceived injustice or lack of resolution, and potentially contributing to their reluctance to fully cooperate with certain aspects of the investigation. Paranoia. The traumatic experience can distort an individual's view of the world, leading to heightened suspicion and paranoia. Victims may constantly worry about another invasion or the return of the perpetrator, struggling to function due to deep-seated feelings of mistrust towards others and their environment. This heightened suspicion could have influenced the Ramseys' interactions with investigators and the public, contributing to the complex dynamics of the case and potentially leading to a defensive posture. Depression and sadness. Feelings of sadness, hopelessness, or emptiness are common after a break-in. This can stem from the loss of sentimental items, a profound sense of guilt for not preventing the invasion, or a disheartening loss of faith in humanity. If these feelings, or a loss of interest in previously enjoyed activities, become an everyday phenomenon, it may indicate trauma-related depression. The profound grief and loss experienced by the Ramseys would undoubtedly have led to deep sadness and potentially depression, which can manifest in withdrawal or a perceived lack of appropriate emotional display by outsiders. One of the most severe and enduring psychological conditions that can arise is post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. PTSD is a mental health condition caused by experiencing or witnessing an extremely stressful or terrifying event. While many individuals may struggle to adjust after a traumatic event, most recover with time and self-care. However, if symptoms worsen, persist for months or years, and significantly interfere with daily functioning, it may indicate PTSD. Symptoms can appear within 3 months or even years later, fluctuating in intensity over time. These symptoms are generally categorized into 4 types: intrusive memories, flashbacks, nightmares, distressing thoughts, avoidance of thoughts, conversations, places, or people related to the trauma, negative changes in thinking and mood, negative thoughts about self, others, world, persistent negative emotions like blame, guilt, anger, shame, memory problems, detachment, loss of interest, and changes in physical and emotional reactions, hyperarousal, being easily startled, constant guarding, irritability, difficulty sleeping, trouble concentrating. The Ramseys, having endured such a public and unresolved tragedy, would be at high risk for developing PTSD, with symptoms potentially manifesting as intrusive thoughts about the events of December 26th, or a persistent state of hyperarousal, which could explain some of their behaviors observed during interviews. A more complex and often more severe condition is complex PTSD, CPTSD, which results from chronic, prolonged, or repetitive trauma from which escape is impossible or dangerous. CPTSD includes most of the core symptoms of PTSD, but also presents with additional, extensive issues with emotion regulation, identity and sense of self, and severe difficulty in forming and maintaining meaningful relationships. Traumatic stress, particularly the chronic nature associated with CPTSD, can lead to permanent changes in brain chemistry and structure, with neuroimaging studies suggesting these changes are often more severe in individuals with CPTSD compared to those with PTSD. While CPTSD is typically associated with ongoing trauma, the prolonged nature of the unresolved investigation and intense public scrutiny in the Ramsey case could contribute to complex psychological challenges for the family, potentially impacting their long-term emotional and relational functioning. D. Understanding the unseen, interconnections, and broader implications in the Ramsey case. The profound psychological and physiological responses to a domestic intrusion reveal deep interconnections between the individual's inner world and their external environment. One significant observation is the ripple effect, from personal sanctuary to societal fabric. This profound emotional upheaval can cause drastic changes to an individual's personality and strain their relationships. If the home is indeed an extension of self, then its violation is not merely a crime against property, but a profound assault on identity and security. The anger and paranoia experienced by the victim can strain interpersonal relationships within the family and community, while the pervasive fear can lead to social phobias and withdrawal, impacting the collective sense of safety within a neighborhood. This demonstrates how a seemingly isolated incident of domestic intrusion can fray the very fabric of social cohesion. Sociologically, the cumulative impact of such events, especially if perceived as frequent or unresolved, can erode community trust and foster a climate of fear, influencing collective behaviors around security, privacy, and social interaction. This highlights the importance of effective community support systems and justice responses, not just for the individual victim, but for the overall health and well-being of the entire social body. In the Ramsey case, The intense public scrutiny and the unresolved nature of the crime undoubtedly amplified these psychological impacts, affecting the family's ability to grieve privately and straining their relationships with the community and the justice system, leading to a complex public narrative. Detailing the impact of stress and trauma in the Ramsey case. To further illustrate the complex interplay between stress, memory, and trauma, let's delve into specific examples of what this might look like in the Ramsey case. Impact of stress on memory stages. Stress significantly impacts learning and memory, influencing cognitive functions vital for recall. This influence can affect the three main stages of memory: encoding, consolidation, and retrieval. In the Ramsey case, the extreme stress experienced by John and Patsy Ramsey on the morning of December 26th could have impaired their memory encoding of specific details, such as the exact state of all doors and windows. Stress can restrict memory during the task of encoding information, meaning that under duress certain details might not have been fully processed or stored accurately in their minds. Post-learning stress, especially with high adrenaline, can impair memory consolidation, which means that even if initial details were perceived, the process of stabilizing those memories could have been disrupted by the ongoing trauma. Furthermore, stress can significantly affect memory retrieval, making it difficult to access and recall previously stored information accurately. This could explain why John Ramsey's statements about checking the house for locked doors varied over time, as the stress of repeated questioning and the passage of time could have influenced his ability to retrieve a consistent and precise memory of those chaotic early hours. These memory inconsistencies, while potentially explained by trauma, also contribute to the lingering questions surrounding the case. Psychological and physiological manifestations of trauma, a domestic intrusion, especially one with tragic consequences, can lead to a wide range of emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and physiological symptoms. For the Ramsey family, the profound violation of their home and the loss of JonBenet would have triggered intense emotional responses. They would likely experience anxiety and fear, manifesting as persistent worry about their safety or the possibility of another intrusion, potentially leading to panic attacks or social phobias, making it difficult to engage with the public or media. Anger would also be a natural response, perhaps directed at the unknown perpetrator, or even at law enforcement if they felt the investigation was mishandled, as was publicly reported at times. Feelings of depression and sadness, including hopelessness or emptiness, would be profound, stemming from the immense loss and the shattering of their sense of security. Cognitively, the Ramseys might have experienced intrusive memories or flashbacks of the traumatic event, reliving the discovery of the ransom note or the search for JonBenet. Memory problems, such as difficulty recalling important aspects of the traumatic event or trouble concentrating, would be expected given the neurobiological impact of trauma on brain regions like the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. This could contribute to the inconsistencies in their statements. Paranoia, leading to heightened suspicion of others or a distorted view of the world, might also develop, making it difficult for them to trust those around them, including investigators or even friends. Behaviorally, they might exhibit avoidance of thoughts, conversations, places, or people related to the trauma, such as avoiding discussions about the basement or the events of that night. Hyperarousal or constantly being on guard for danger would be a common physiological and behavioral manifestation, leading to difficulty sleeping, irritability, and being easily startled. This state of heightened vigilance is a direct consequence of the brain's altered stress response systems, including norepinephrine and cortisol dysregulation. Physiologically, the trauma would lead to sleep disturbances as the body's persistent fight or flight response interferes with rest. More profoundly, the traumatic stress could lead to changes in brain structure and chemistry, affecting the amygdala, fear processing, hippocampus memory, and prefrontal cortex executive function, potentially resulting in long-term neurochemical dysregulation. These physiological changes underpin the psychological symptoms, demonstrating that the trauma literally reshapes the individual's biological being. For example, the persistent public scrutiny and unresolved nature of the case could exacerbate these physiological responses, leading to chronic stress and its associated impacts on the Ramseys' overall well-being. All these manifestations tie back directly to the breaking of the window, the contradictions in testimonies, and the overall impact of the crime on the Ramsey family. If an intruder was truly the cause, why do these profound and lasting psychological and physiological impacts and the resulting behavioral inconsistencies seem to point inward as much as outward? Fourth, the collective reflection, cultural and societal dimensions of intrusion. The experience and aftermath of a domestic intrusion are not solely individual burdens, they are profoundly shaped by and in turn influence broader cultural norms and societal narratives. The way a community perceives and responds to such violations reflects its collective values regarding privacy, security, and justice. A. The sacred enclosure, cultural interpretations of home, privacy, and security in the Ramsey case. The very concept of home as a safe haven is deeply ingrained in human consciousness, yet its interpretation and the associated expectations of privacy and security are profoundly shaped by culture. What one society deems a reasonable expectation of privacy, another might view as an unnecessary constraint on communal life or even a sign of distrust. This cultural relativity extends beyond mere geographical location to deeply ingrained norms, religious beliefs, and historical experiences that define the boundaries of personal and shared space. In the Ramsey case, the public's intense focus on the family's private life and home security, as reported by local and national news, reflected a societal expectation of privacy within the domestic sphere, which was then dramatically breached by the crime. The public's fascination with the intimate details of the Ramsey home, from its layout to its security flaws, underscored a collective cultural value placed on the sanctity of the private dwelling. A key cultural dimension influencing perceptions of privacy is the degree to which a society emphasizes individualism versus collectivism. In individualistic cultures, prevalent in regions like North America and Western Europe, personal autonomy and individual rights are highly prioritized. Privacy is often seen as a fundamental right, essential for self-expression and personal development, leading individuals to guard their personal information closely and to be wary of intrusions into their private lives. The Ramseys, as a family in a predominantly individualistic American culture, would have held strong expectations of privacy within their home, making the intrusion particularly violating. Their subsequent attempts to control information and their interactions with the media can be seen through this cultural lens of protecting individual and family privacy in the face of overwhelming public intrusion. Conversely, in collectivist cultures, common in many parts of Asia, Africa, and Latin America, the needs of the group often take precedence over the individual. Maintaining social harmony and fulfilling obligations to the community are highly valued, meaning that transparency and a willingness to share personal information may be seen as signs of trust and solidarity, while an excessive concern for privacy might be viewed as selfish or even suspicious. The role of technology further complicates these cultural dynamics. Societies that have readily adopted digital technologies may exhibit a more relaxed attitude towards data sharing and online privacy, having grown accustomed to the pervasive nature of digital interaction. In contrast, cultures more cautious about technological advancements may show greater wariness. Even within a single culture, generational differences are apparent, with younger generations who have grown up with social media often being more comfortable sharing personal details online than older generations who remember a time before the internet. These cultural nuances also significantly influence the formation and enforcement of privacy laws, reflecting a society's emphasis on individual rights versus broader considerations like national security or economic development. The extensive media coverage of the Ramsey case, amplified by emerging digital platforms, demonstrated how technology could rapidly disseminate information and shape public opinion about a family's private life and security, blurring the lines between public interest and private grief. These variations underscore the cultural construct of sanctuary and its vulnerability. The psychological distress that stems from the breach of a home, including anxiety, fear, and paranoia, is not uniformly experienced, but is profoundly filtered through a cultural lens. If a culture strongly emphasizes individual privacy and the inviolability of personal space, as is often the case in Western contexts, the violation of the home feels more profound and deeply personal. The assault on the physical space becomes an assault on the very identity and autonomy of the individual. Conversely, while a collectivist culture might have different coping mechanisms or community responses to such an event, the fundamental shock to the safe space remains, albeit interpreted through a different cultural framework. Anthropologically, the home serves as a primary site for the reproduction of cultural values and the formation of personal identity. Its violation, therefore, is not merely a crime against property or person, but a profound assault on a deeply embedded cultural construct. This implies that societal responses to domestic intrusion, including legal frameworks, law enforcement practices, and support systems, are themselves culturally shaped. Understanding these cultural underpinnings is crucial for developing effective interventions and for interpreting public reactions to such events, recognizing that the human experience of violation is always embedded within a specific cultural context. B. The public narrative, media, speculation, and the human quest for meaning in the Ramsey case. Society's engagement with stories of crime, particularly those involving domestic spaces, is a complex phenomenon driven by a fundamental human quest for meaning and control in the face of the inexplicable. The allure of true crime narratives stems from a deep-seated human need to comprehend the incomprehensible, to confront fears, and to draw clear lines between what is considered good and evil. These narratives satisfy a primal need to know, providing insights into criminal investigations, the workings of the justice system, and the motivations behind profound acts of harm. For many, particularly women, consuming true crime offers a strategic element for personal preservation, allowing them to refine survival strategies and gain a sense of control by learning about the patterns and behaviors of those who might inflict harm. However, the consumption of such narratives, especially when they touch upon the sanctity of domestic spaces, brings significant ethical considerations. One major concern is the distortion of danger. True crime stories often sensationalize external threats, such as serial killers, leading the public to focus on comparatively low-risk dangers. In stark contrast, research explicitly states that domestic spaces are often more dangerous than any poorly lit car park due to the high risk of harm by an intimate partner. This creates a significant disconnect between what society is conditioned to fear and where actual danger often resides, inadvertently masking the pervasive conflict that frequently unfolds behind closed doors. This exploitation of victims and their loved ones' profound suffering is a regularly denounced ethical concern. The media's influence on public perception of crime is immense and multifaceted. Both social media platforms and traditional news outlets contribute to the overrepresentation and sensationalism of crime, leading the public to perceive criminal activity as more prevalent and threatening than actual crime data suggests. This phenomenon is often driven by financial incentives, as increased viewer engagement allows media outlets to raise advertising prices. This creates a self-reinforcing feedback loop. The public's inherent fascination with crime is exploited by media through sensationalism, which in turn amplifies public fear and anxiety, creating a demand for more such content, further distorting perception. The media, while seemingly providing information, acts as a powerful shaper of collective reality, often prioritizing engagement over accuracy. This dynamic also leads to biased portrayals and stereotyping. In high-profile cases like JonBenet Ramsey's, the media's focus on specific behaviors and perceived inconsistencies within the family statements became a central part of the public narrative. For example, Burke Ramsey's interview on Dr. Phil, where he was observed to chuckle and grin inappropriately while discussing his sister's death, became a significant point of public discussion and speculation, as reported in various news sources. This perceived lack of appropriate emotion from Burke, whether due to trauma, personality, or other factors, fueled public curiosity and judgment, leading to accusations and lawsuits. Similarly, details like the presence of pineapple in JonBenet's system and Burke's reported history of scatological problems and anger issues were widely reported and contributed to public theories about the family's involvement. These specific behavioral details, amplified by media, profoundly influenced collective understanding and suspicion, demonstrating how the media's lens can distort reality and shape collective fear. The media's influence extends to legal processes, as extensive coverage can sway jury perception, potentially impacting trial outcomes and making it challenging for defendants to receive a fair trial due to prejudicial reporting. Moreover, biased reporting can either bolster public support for or fuel skepticism towards law enforcement, shaping collective attitudes towards the institutions of justice. The combined effect of these factors highlights the media's kaleidoscope, distorting reality and shaping collective fear. This leads to a heightened sense of insecurity in society, even if actual crime rates are stable or declining. It can foster a climate of mistrust, influence policy decisions, for example, increase surveillance measures, and perpetuate harmful stereotypes. This calls for an ethical imperative for responsible journalism and media literacy, as the distorted lens of media can profoundly impact public discourse, legal processes, and the very sense of safety within a community. The human quest for meaning and control in the face of the inexplicable is inadvertently channeled into a system that can sensationalize and misrepresent, deepening societal anxieties rather than alleviating them. Furthermore, these observations reveal the unseen shadows, the discrepancy between perceived and actual danger. There is a significant disconnect between what society is conditioned to fear, often sensational, external threats, and where actual danger frequently resides within the home from known individuals. The media's portrayal of crime contributes to this misperception. This misdirection of fear can lead to a societal blind spot regarding the pervasive issue of domestic harm, which is often hidden behind closed doors. Anthropologically and sociologically, This reveals a profound societal challenge in acknowledging and addressing internal threats to the sanctuary of the home. The cultural narrative of the home as a safe space, while comforting, can inadvertently mask the realities of domestic conflict and the quiet struggles that sometimes unfold within the human spirit. This calls for a critical reevaluation of societal priorities in crime prevention and victim support, shifting focus to the often unseen landscapes of danger, however uncomfortable they may be, and advocating for a more balanced and accurate portrayal of crime by media. Fifth conclusion, weaving threads of understanding. Our journey through the multidimensional landscape of domestic intrusion, particularly through the lens of the JonBenet Ramsey case, reveals a complex and deeply human tapestry. This exploration has meticulously drawn together the intricate threads of forensic detail, psychological and physiological responses, and cultural and societal dimensions, demonstrating that such an event is far more than a mere crime against property. It is a profound disruption that challenges our understanding of truth, memory, and the very nature of safety within the home. The forensic analysis, from the routine pathways of access to the silent testimony of trace evidence, provides the tangible framework for understanding how a sanctuary can be breached. Yet, as we've seen, the paradox of domestic security, where convenience often overrides stringent measures, and the inherent unreliability of human recollection under extreme duress, underscore the critical role of objective physical evidence. The stark contrast between subjective accounts and forensic findings, such as the police test of the basement window, highlights the ongoing tension in investigations between human narrative and the silent, unyielding truth revealed by scientific scrutiny. The specific contradictions in the Ramsey family's accounts, particularly regarding the basement window entry and the garage door status, serve as poignant examples of how individual behaviors and memory can diverge under pressure, inviting deeper scrutiny into the very fabric of recollection. These inconsistencies, when viewed against the backdrop of an unsolved crime, compel us to ask, why do these discrepancies persist if an external intruder is truly to blame? Internally, the mind and body undergo profound transformations in the wake of such a violation. The shifting sands of memory, where vivid recollections can belie factual accuracy, and the brain's physiological remodeling under traumatic stress, illustrate that the suffering experienced is not merely psychological but deeply neurobiological. The spectrum of enduring distress, from anxiety and fear to the profound burdens of PTSD and CPTSD, underscores that the violation of home is an assault on the very core of an individual's being, reshaping their capacity for trust, emotional regulation, and social connection. These psychological and physiological responses are directly applicable to the Ramsey case, helping us to understand the family, its behaviors and statements under immense pressure, and why their narratives might contain such perplexing inconsistencies. Collectively, society's response to domestic intrusion is filtered through deeply ingrained cultural interpretations of home, privacy, and security. The allure of true crime narratives, while fulfilling a human quest for meaning, is often exploited by media through sensationalism and biased portrayals, leading to a distorted public perception of danger and a heightened, often misplaced collective fear. This perpetuates a societal blind spot regarding the often unseen struggles within domestic confines, where the most profound harms can unfold. The public's intense focus on the behaviors and inconsistencies of individuals involved in high-profile cases, often amplified by media coverage, demonstrates how collective narratives are shaped and how public judgment can be influenced by perceived behavioral anomalies, as vividly seen in the media's portrayal of the Ramsey family. In synthesis, a domestic intrusion is a profound violation that echoes through the individual's psyche, altering memory, physiology, and emotional well-being, and ripples through the broader societal fabric, challenging notions of safety, privacy, and trust. The lasting effects, from the subtle shifts in daily habits to the deep scars of trauma, demand comprehensive and compassionate understanding. This report underscores the imperative for a compassionate, informed, and ethically sensitive discourse when confronting the complex tapestry of human experience in the face of profound disruption. It advocates for a societal approach that integrates scientific understanding of trauma and memory with a critical awareness of media influence and cultural biases, fostering a more just and empathetic response to those who navigate the aftermath of such profound violations. This includes a commitment to gentle language when discussing the most tender human vulnerabilities, ensuring that the narrative respects the delicate nature of existence and the quiet struggles that sometimes unfold within the human spirit, all while tying back to the specific details and persistent contradictions observed in the JonBenet Ramsey case, which continue to challenge a singular, simple explanation. sometimes unfold within the human spirit, all while tying back to the specific details and persistent contradictions observed in the JonBenet Ramsey case, which continue to challenge a singular, simple explanation.